Welcome to Life Stories, where the moments we hide away become the ones that define us. Imagine building your entire life from scratch, only to have the people you trusted most try to tear it all away in a single night. Tonight, we dive into the raw, heartbreaking journey of a woman who spent years fighting to be seen, only to discover that sometimes the biggest battles are not against the world, but against your own blood. It's a story about betrayal masked as love, about the quiet strength it takes to stand when no one claps for you, and the life you can still claim when everything else is stripped away. Stay with us until the end, because the final twist will leave you questioning not just loyalty, but what true freedom really costs. And now, let's step quietly into the beginning of Amelia's story. Amelia Hart had always known her place in the world, the shadow behind the spotlight. Growing up in the small, picturesque town of Willow Creek, Oregon, she learned early that love in her family wasn't unconditional. It was performance-based, and Amelia was never cast in the starring role. That honor belonged to her younger sister, Brielle, the golden girl with her sunshine laugh and effortless charm. If Brielle was the sun, Amelia was the quiet satellite orbiting around her, barely visible, barely acknowledged. The memories came back sharper than she wished. Her 5th birthday, for instance. Amelia had begged for a science kit, fascinated by the idea of mixing chemicals, unraveling mysteries. When she ripped open the gift, hope pounding against her ribs, she found a pink frilly dress instead. Her mother, Carol, had clapped her hands delightedly. "Now you can look just as pretty as Brielle," she chirped, missing the way Amelia's small shoulders dropped. Her father, Richard, barely glanced at her before sweeping Brielle into his arms, twirling her like a ballerina. It wasn't the last time Amelia would vanish in plain sight. Every school achievement she fought for, every honor roll certificate, every science fair medal, gathered dust in the back room, while Brielle's dance trophies gleamed proudly in the living room, polished weekly, admired by every guest. Amelia taught herself to stop expecting applause. Instead, she nurtured something sturdier, something more dangerous. A silent, stubborn fire. She wasn't chasing their love anymore. She was chasing her own freedom. College had been her first taste of air that didn't smell like someone else's expectations. At Oregon State, nobody cared that she wasn't the pretty one or the charming one. They cared that she was brilliant. Professors fought over her for research projects. Labs buzzed with her ideas. She thrived in late nights and early mornings, in the sweet ache of exhaustion after a breakthrough. She didn't attend parties or spring break trips. While others sought adventure, Amelia built a future. And by 29, she bought her first home, a modest but perfect 2-bedroom on the edge of Willow Creek, a symbol of everything she had built with her own scarred hands. The day she moved in, she stood barefoot in the empty living room, the late afternoon sun pouring through the windows, and made herself a promise. She would never let anyone diminish her again. She should have known better. When the invitation came, Brielle's wedding to Tyler, the local pharmacist everyone loved, Amelia tucked away her unease and RSVP'd yes. Family, after all, still whispered a strange pull through her veins, even if it had been a noose more often than a net. The wedding day bloomed in dazzling ivory and gold. Fairy lights tangled through the rafters of the town's historic ballroom. Guests floated in pastel dresses and sharp tuxedos. Laughter and champagne filled the air. Amelia hovered near the edges, her lilac dress modest but elegant, a locket tucked under the fabric, a quiet personal gift she planned to give Brielle later. Everything felt almost too perfect, a polished play where Amelia was still the awkward understudy waiting in the wings. It was near the refreshment table that Carol found her, smiles stretched so tightly it might crack. Richard flanked her, stiff and formal. "Amelia, darling," Carol purred, voice too sugary, too sharp underneath. "We need a word, just a small family favor." Family favor. The words coiled like smoke in Amelia's chest. They pulled her aside to a quiet corner where the music dimmed into a background hum. Across the room, Brielle glided like a vision in white, oblivious. "You have that lovely new house all to yourself." Carol began, her eyes gleaming with something feral. "And Brielle and Tyler will be starting their life together. It's silly for you to hold on to all that space when they could build a real family there." Amelia froze. Richard chimed in, smiling as if he were offering her a gift rather than gutting her. "Think of it as your wedding present to them," he said, her hands curled into fists at her sides. Years of sacrifice, lonely hours in labs, missed birthdays, sleepless nights, flashed before her eyes, all for a house they now expected her to hand over like a spare coat. "No," she said, her voice low, steady. Carol's smile collapsed into something venomous. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed, the mask slipping entirely now. "After everything we've done for you." Before Amelia could step back, Richard moved. Fast. He grabbed a heavy metal cake stand from a nearby dessert table, the one holding Brielle's engagement cake, and swung. The impact was a white-hot explosion of pain. Amelia staggered backward, warm blood pooling down her temple. Gasps broke across the room. Plates clattered. Someone screamed. The fairy tale wedding shattered into chaos. Phones flashed up. Guests froze. Brielle stood, paralyzed in her pristine dress, mouth open but silent. Peter, Tyler's best friend, and the quiet soul who had chatted with Amelia earlier, surged forward, shoving himself between Amelia and Carol, who had begun lunging forward with a snarl. "Stay away from her," Peter barked, a voice of steel under velvet. Across the hall, Eric, another guest, was already calling the police, his voice crisp, furious. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Amelia, swaying on her feet, locked eyes with Brielle across the room. In that frozen second, she saw something unexpected, something raw, something breaking apart behind her sister's perfect smile. But it was too late. It had always been too late. What would you do if your own family tried to take away everything you built? Would you still believe in forgiveness after they crossed the final line? And just when Amelia thought the worst was over, a truth hidden for decades was about to surface, threatening to rewrite everything she thought she knew. Follow along as the storm truly begins. The world outside blurred into sirens and flashing lights, but inside Amelia's mind, everything narrowed to a single point of clarity. She had no home here anymore. The paramedics loaded her onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency, murmuring reassurances she barely heard. Blood matted her hair, and every throb of her heartbeat sent a fresh wave of pain crashing through her skull. Still, she kept her gaze locked on the ballroom doors, where Richard and Carol were being handcuffed, their faces twisted into masks of fury and disbelief. Peter rode with her in the ambulance, his hands fisted on his knees, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. Once, she might have asked him to leave, to spare herself the embarrassment of needing anyone. But not tonight. Tonight, she let herself lean into the presence of someone who didn't see her as an obligation or a disappointment. At the hospital, under the harsh fluorescent lights, doctors worked to stitch the wound on her temple. The prognosis was better than she expected: a concussion, deep bruising, but no fractures. Lucky, they said. Amelia didn't feel lucky. She felt hollow. Peter sat beside her bed, a bouquet of wild daisies in his hands, looking painfully out of place in the sterile room. His tie was loosened. His hair, usually neatly combed, was mussed from running his hands through it. "You should press charges," he said quietly, his voice rough around the edges. "This can't be swept under the rug. Not this time." Amelia closed her eyes. The thought made her stomach churn. Suing her own parents? It felt wrong, even after everything. Wasn't she supposed to just endure as she always had? Wasn't forgiveness the price she had to pay for belonging, even if she had never truly belonged? "I don't know if I can," she whispered. Peter leaned forward, his voice low, insistent. "Amelia, they could have killed you. They would have taken everything you worked for and smiled while they did it. This isn't about revenge. It's about survival. It's about finally choosing yourself." The words hit something raw inside her. For so long, she had been taught that endurance was virtue, that needing justice was weakness. But lying here, battered and broken, she realized that maybe the greatest betrayal wasn't what Richard and Carol had done to her. It was what she had spent her whole life doing to herself by pretending it was acceptable. A sharp knock interrupted them. A nurse entered, followed by a man in a sharp navy suit carrying a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Mason Gray, an attorney specializing in family law, and Peter's longtime friend. "I reviewed the footage Eric and a few other guests sent over," Mason said without preamble. "Frankly, it's devastating for them. Crystal clear evidence of assault, multiple eyewitnesses. They don't stand a chance." Amelia swallowed hard. Hearing it laid out so clinically made it real. "You'd be doing more than protecting yourself," Mason added, his voice gentler now. "You'd be standing up for every version of yourself they tried to silence." There was a long silence. Amelia stared down at her hands, pale and trembling against the hospital blanket. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice shaking, but firm. "I'll file charges." Peter reached out, squeezing her hand, a fierce pride burning in his eyes. But just as the decision settled over her like a fragile new skin, another nurse knocked hesitantly at the door. "Miss Hart," she said carefully, "there's someone asking to see you. Says she's your sister." Amelia's heart stumbled in her chest. "Brielle," Peter's hand tightened around hers. "You don't have to," he said. "You owe her nothing." Amelia hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I need to hear what she has to say." The door opened, and Brielle stepped inside, still wearing her wedding dress, though the hem was dirtied and her makeup streaked from tears. She looked like a ghost of the girl Amelia had grown up with, ethereal, broken, real in a way she never had been before. "Amelia," she whispered, voice trembling, "I'm so sorry." Amelia stared at her sister, unsure what to feel. "I didn't know," Brielle said, coming closer. I thought they loved us the same. I thought you were just different, that you didn't need it like I did." Her breath hitched. "But I saw tonight. I saw everything, and I realized I was their trophy. And you were the one they were afraid of. Because you didn't need to be admired to be strong." Tears blurred Amelia's vision. Part of her wanted to fling herself into Brielle's arms and sob until the pain was washed clean. Another part, harder and colder, wanted to turn away, to protect the fragile wholeness she was just beginning to claim. "I can't undo what they did," Brielle said, voice breaking, "but I can stand with you now, if you'll let me." Amelia looked at her, really looked, saw the girl behind the sparkling smile, the cracks beneath the polished surface. Forgiveness wasn't simple. It wasn't deserved, just because it was asked for. But maybe, just maybe, it could be chosen. Before Amelia could speak, Mason's phone buzzed on the side table. He checked the screen and his expression darkened immediately. "There's something you both need to know," he said grimly. "Richard and Carol, they've already posted bail, and they're threatening to countersue for defamation of character if you proceed." The room tilted. Peter swore under his breath. Brielle's face drained of color. Amelia gripped the sheets, the fire in her chest reigniting. They weren't going to surrender. They were going to drag her through hell again. But this time, she wouldn't be standing alone. What would you do if standing up for yourself meant facing an even bigger storm? Would you fight back, or would you walk away to protect your peace? As new battles ignite and old wounds rip deeper, Amelia must decide if the price of justice is one she's willing to pay. Don't miss what happens next. Amelia stood at the threshold of her own future. Heart pounding, the weight of years pressing heavy against her ribs. The courthouse loomed in front of her, a place of judgment, of reckoning, but maybe, just maybe, also of liberation. Peter squeezed her hand once, grounding her, steadying her. Brielle stood behind them, pale but determined. No longer the perfect daughter, draped in lace and smiles. Now she was something messier, more real. Together, they walked through the heavy doors. Inside, the air buzzed with murmurs, with curiosity, with judgment. Reporters lined the hallway, flashes of cameras sparking like tiny explosions. Amelia kept her chin up. She wasn't here for them. She was here for every version of herself that had ever been silenced. The trial was brutal in ways she had both expected and feared. Richard's attorney painted Amelia as unstable, vindictive, a daughter desperate for attention. Carol cried on the stand, spinning tales of a difficult child, of thankless years of motherhood. Amelia's hands trembled as she took the witness stand, but her voice did not. She spoke of birthdays forgotten, achievements dismissed, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. She described the wedding night, the cake stand, the blood. The jury watched the videos, grainy footage but clear enough. The arc of the metal stand, the sickening way her body crumpled to the floor, the chaos that followed. Witness after witness testified. Eric, Brandon, even Peter, his voice shaking with emotion as he recounted how he had seen Richard raise his hand against Amelia without a flicker of hesitation. Brielle took the stand last. She stood there, still in pieces, and said, in a voice that shook but did not break, "I was the favored one. I didn't see it until it was too late. But everything Amelia says, it's true, and it cost us more than I can even explain." The courtroom held its breath. When the verdict came, Amelia didn't cry. She simply sat very still as the words washed over her. Guilty. 8 years each. No parole for 6. Full restitution for emotional and physical damages. Justice. In its cold, imperfect, brutal way. Outside the courthouse, sunlight splintered through the clouds. The air tasted different, sharper, freer. Amelia turned toward Peter and Brielle. "I don't know what happens now," she said, her voice a little lost. "You live?" Peter said simply. "You build." "And if I fall?" she asked, half a smile ghosting her lips. "Then we catch you," Brielle said, stepping forward, a tremulous hope flickering in her eyes. Amelia didn't answer with words. She just nodded, feeling something crack open inside her chest. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The weeks that followed weren't some fairy tale. Healing never was. There were nights Amelia woke up gasping, the memory of that cake stand flashing in her mind. There were mornings she doubted herself, wondered if the world would always see her as the broken daughter who dragged her own parents to court. But then there were also moments, bright, sharp, undeniable, where she caught herself laughing without fear, where she stood barefoot in the backyard of her little house, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise through the mist and thought, "This is mine." Peter proposed again properly 2 months later, in the quiet sanctuary of their favorite hiking trail, where the moss grew thick and the air smelled of rain. There were no cameras, no witnesses, no grand gestures, just Peter, dropping to one knee, his voice steady. No promises of perfection, just a promise that whatever storms come next, we'll face them together. And this time, Amelia said yes without hesitation. Their wedding was small, a gathering of friends, of chosen family. Brielle stood beside her as maid of honor, her speech trembling with emotion as she spoke not of fairy tales, but of real battles fought and scars earned. After the ceremony, Amelia walked alone for a moment down the gravel path behind the little cabin they'd rented for the weekend. The lake spread out before her, glassy and infinite. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the locket, the one she had meant for Brielle all those months ago. It had survived the chaos, a tiny piece of hope tucked away in silence. She opened it. Inside was a tiny inscription. New journeys, new love, new strength. Amelia smiled through the sting of tears. Maybe the life she had dreamed of hadn't died under a cake stand that night. Maybe it had been waiting for her all along, just beyond the fire and ruin. She clasped the locket around her own neck, not because she needed a reminder, but because she had earned it. Every scar, every victory, every breath of this hard, wild, beautiful life was hers. As the first stars blinked awake in the twilight sky, Amelia Hart stepped forward into her new beginning. Heart battered but beating strong, dreams shattered and rebuilt into something fiercer than ever before. And for the first time, she didn't walk in anyone's shadow. She walked wholly, brilliantly, terrifyingly into her own light. What part of Amelia's journey touched your heart the most? Share your feelings with us below. If you loved this story, type 100 in the comments and tell us, where are you watching from? Don't forget to share this story with your friends. Thank you for being part of Life Stories.